When you work in an Excel spreadsheet, sometimes you just would like to, say, freeze the column headings or the row headings and be able to scroll up and down in that large spreadsheet so much easier than you're able to do currently. Maybe you have page breaks because you have such a large spreadsheet, but you'd like to very easily adjust them. Well, those are two of the things that we're going to look at today with Excel and the Views tab as we look at Page Break View and Freeze Panes and maybe even a couple of others. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and let's look at Excel and what we can do to help with the views on our spreadsheet. Today we have a list of dates and numbers of customers, possibly even cold calls that we have made on any given day. And it looks like it starts, the first week of January. And then as we go through, we have numbers through September. And certainly this is a long enough list that I need to scroll up and down to see the whole thing. We are in normal view right now, but there are some other views that may help us with this spreadsheet. To look at other views, we want to go above the ribbon and almost to the far right to the View tab and click on it. And we can see that in this second group, the Workbook Views group, that we are using the normal view, which is what most people use most of the time when they use Excel. And in our previous video, we explored the page layout view, so we'll click on it. And just a reminder that this is very similar to what you use when you're in Word, where you not only see, say, the grid lines, you see the rows, you see the columns, but you also see the headers and footers, and you see the actual edges of the pages as they would look when you print this spreadsheet out. And again, we can see that this goes clear through row 56 and the end of the year. Now there is also something else that we want to look at, but let's go to normal first. Because with our normal view, sometimes we can't see where the page breaks are going to occur. And it used to be when you were in normal view that if you wanted to see where the page breaks were going to occur, what you would need to do generally was that you would go to File and you would go to Print, and then you would look at your print preview to see where the page breaks were taking place. And so this looks like it goes through almost the end of October, and then on page 2 it finishes October and goes through the rest of the year. And there are ways to fix those page breaks, but one of the easiest ways is to simply go to View and then look at your page break preview. So I'm going to click on that. And when I do, you'll notice that it says, okay, well, this is the end of your data with that solid blue line. And then we get what looks like a watermark that says page 1. And as I scroll down, it also shows me a blue dashed line, which is the end of the page as it's defined right now. And then it says page 2. And sometimes people will think, I'm going to see a gray page 1 and a gray page 2 when I print. And no, that's just sort of a layer that's put on top of the view so you know what pages you are looking at. If you simply want to move an existing page break, look at this. In your page break preview, all you need to do is rest your mouse on top of that blue dashed line, and you can simply click and drag up. So let's say that I want to have a split between May and June. Then I drop it off, and look at this, page 2, that has moved up, and it still says page 1. If I go to, say, normal view, I can now see that line between May and June. And if I go to File and Print Preview, I can see that I have the end of May on one page and I can see the start of June on another page. That is so easy, just click and drag. Occasionally, you cannot just click and drag, so let me show you a couple things you can do. Let's go back to Page Break Preview. And one of the things that you can do is do a right click. So let's say that I want to add a page break, and this would be kind of silly, but let's say that I want to add a page break between August and September. Well, what I can do, keeping in mind that page breaks are created to the left and above where I click, I want to be sure that I click here at the very first cell and do a right click actually, and then I can insert a page break and separate August from the rest of the year. If I want to add in a break at the columns, and maybe I decide that I want to have a split between the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the rest of the week, well, I would need to click in E1 here, because remember, it's going to put in a break above and to the left of where I've clicked. So I don't want to click just anywhere in column E, but again, I could right click and I could insert a page break. And so now I have a page break here. Well, what if I want to reset all of my page breaks? Well, I could again go to E1 and right click. And one of my choices here is to reset all page breaks. If you don't like to right click, let's say that we want to add in a page break between March and April. I'm going to click in column A, the first cell in row 17, and instead, and this is where it gets a little confusing, so stick right with me. Instead of going to Workbook Views and Page Layout here, I'm going to go above the ribbon and go to the third tab on the ribbon, which is Page Layout. And then I can go to the Page Setup group, find Breaks, and insert a page break here. Or for that matter, I could go to Breaks and remove a page break. Or just as we could with the right click, we can click the drop down and reset all of the page breaks so that they're just the naturally occurring page breaks. When we go to View, we have Normal. That is what we use most of the time. We have Page Layout when we really want to see the headers and the footers and where the page numbers are going to be. And then we have Page Break Preview, which helps us determine how our data is going to print to its best advantage, and then we can either right-click or use the Page Layout tab to insert and remove those page breaks so that they are just the best possible solution for our spreadsheet. I've gone back to our normal view and I've made sure to reset our page breaks so that they're just naturally occurring, because there is one other thing when we go to that view that we might find extremely helpful, and that is something that is called freeze panes. For example, if I click here in my spreadsheet and I look at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I have very similar kinds of numbers, and I start scrolling down, eventually I lose the column headings. Now in this case, it's pretty easy to determine what that is, but if you have a really large spreadsheet and you have 5, 10, 15 columns of numbers that are very similar, and you start scrolling down, it's very easy to lose where you are in that spreadsheet. So one of the ways that you can always know where you are is to do something that's called freeze panes. Now, freeze panes works under exactly the same rules as the page break preview. Wherever you click, you are going to freeze above or to the left of where that cell is. So for example, let's say that I want to be sure that I can see all of these column headings that are in row 3. Well, I'm going to click in A4, and then in the View tab, where we found all of our workbook views, we're going to go over to the right to what is called the window group, and it's a really large group, but we can see freeze panes. Now we can click on the drop down here, and really this freeze panes you would use if you want to freeze not only rows but columns. So look at this. This is kind of interesting. Freeze top row. What does that do? Well, look at that. It actually is freezing just row 1, isn't it? So as I scroll down, that doesn't really help, although if I only had column headings here, that would be good. Well, let's click on freeze panes again and let's unfreeze those. Notice that the top choice toggles and always becomes unfreeze. If I want to freeze the first column, that's helpful. Not that we have enough information, but as I scroll to the right, if I need to keep something on the left, those row headings, so that I know, say, a person's name or a social security or an address or whatever it is, so that I can relate what I'm seeing on the right with what I see on the left, then I could, again, freeze that first column. Although, let's face it, with large spreadsheets, we may decide that we want to freeze, say, the first 4 rows in the first 3 or 4 columns. So let's see how that would work. But first, let's go to freeze panes and unfreeze. Originally, we started with this A4, so we just simply click on freeze panes and we say, all right, freeze panes, and it's going to freeze what's above where I've clicked. Notice that we get that line, and then I can scroll down. And so rows 1, 2, and 3 are frozen, but as I scroll down, I can keep track of where I am, and I can very easily read what is there. Well, let's go to freeze panes again and unfreeze. It could be that I want to see only what is in that first column. So I could click here in B1, because remember, I'm going to freeze what's to the left, and I can go to freeze panes and click on that. And now as I scroll over, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday eventually will hide, but column A and week of stays the same, doesn't move, it freezes. Well, let's go back to freeze panes and unfreeze, and then let's kind of move back to where we are. Now, it could be that we want to freeze the week of column because we want to be able to scroll to the right as far as we can. But we also want to freeze rows 1, 2, and 3 because we want to be able to scroll down as far as we can. In that case, we would click in B4 so that we're freezing the 3 rows above and the 1 column to the left. We freeze panes and choose freeze panes again. We get our line under row 3 and our line to the right of column A. And so now I can scroll to the right if I need to do that, or I can scroll down and I can do that. It all depends on where you have clicked as to what the results are. But freeze panes can be such a wonderful tool when you're working with a large spreadsheet and you need to kind of keep track of those row and column headings. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online learning for such great resources as Universal Class, Learning Express Library, LinkedIn Learning, and Udemy Business. We also premiere videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. If you miss a video premiere, you'll still be able to find it later when it's convenient for you. You can find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, and you can find us on YouTube by going to our MCPL MO channel.